employees working right there. There's also some good things about that. They have the people
Well, you
working.
know, you always have these, is there some economy of scale and all
Right,
of that? I mean,
right.
I've had the same issue with, but, you know, on this side, of course, Gary Otter gets used for so much stuff. And he's kept totally, you know, his prices are, but he's kept
They
totally
don't
busy
care.
between Keels Partners.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
So,
say that. I'm sorry. Say better back.
hey, Petra,
Sure.
I thought we were gonna have between the meetings, I thought we were gonna have the MSU fight song playing in the background the whole time. Was that not?
It's hard not to.
I
know.
Yes,
I never have them at home. because
something like that.
Of course, the first two guys should have beat Duke.
Who?
The first two guys
I
that
know,
played
that's
should have
my
beat
point.
Duke.
Better now, right?
None of them
I
were
thought I
very good
heard
this
something
year.
like that when I was at the bar the other night.
The, in regards to the charitable contributions, you want me to just make a few words about us wanting to add?
I think we
Yeah,
should now
yeah,
make them.
okay.
We gotta do 3 motions, so
Yeah.
I'll explain it.
Okay.
You're gonna do the one that
I'll
will
do the one on
adjustment.
Kears
Yeah.
Foundation.
Will you do, Chairman, we gotta do 3 motions, so will you do the motion to approve the Habitat
Oh,
budget?
Like to say we're gonna
she asked me to do the women's one.
Okay, you do the Women's Foundation. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll do the Habitat. Okay, I'll do the Habitat, you do the Women's Foundation, and I'll do the.
right.
We gotta split these all up. I did. Yeah. Got it. Do we need to just pledge allegiance again? We just did it
No, we have to do it again because we actually have people watching us and like,
because
oh
it's
my
on
God.
the agenda.
It's on the agenda,
I
we're
wouldn't
like
have
you
done it- I wouldn't
two.
have done it last one, except
We're-
I looked down
Actually,
there and saw it.
I've taken, sometimes
Oh,
ways
have
and means of, yeah, just not, yeah, if it's just a short single meeting, I don't.
Had it said the Star Spangled Man, I'd have done that.
All right. We're gonna go ahead and call, this meeting to order. If everybody will join us again in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Welcome, everybody. First item is the approval of the minutes. First, we have the minutes of the 2019 Council Strategic Planning Retreat of January 23rd. For everybody's record in the audience, this was a 2-day meeting, and we have the minutes split between both days. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any, I've got stereo on both sides here. Any changes, comments?
No.
None? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, those are approved. Minutes of the 2019 Council Strategic Planning Retreat of January 24th. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any changes, comments?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The minutes of the Town Council meeting of March 5th, 2019. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Again, any changes, comments, edits?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mayor's update. I only have one thing I want to update. I think as you recall, at the end of last year, the Key Island utility had filed for a rate adjustment to both water and sewer rates. Those, the requested rate adjustment was in the neighborhood of about 9.9, almost 10%. The town did file as an intervenor in that case. In addition, the St. John's Fire District also filed as an intervenor because of a unique and specific issue they had with respect to hydrant fees. Those matters have been going on since that time, and I just want to report back to the council that at the end of last month, the St. John's Fire District and the ORS, which is the staff arm of the Public Service Commission, and the fire district agreed to a stipulated agreement in the rate case. In that stipulated agreement, I mean, there are a lot of details, but the result of it was a rate increase that would be in the neighborhood of somewhere between, let's say, 6.25% to 6.5%. The water and sewer are slightly different. Don't quote my exact number, because the final ruling has not yet come down, but in the stipulated case, it's in the neighborhood. So it's down a little more than 3% from the 9.9. The town was asked, since we were an intervener, whether we would join into the stipulated agreement. We declined. And you all have a copy of a letter that I sent to the Public Service Commission, which essentially said that we did in fact agree with the majority of the stipulation agreement, specifically all of the adjustments to the rate case economics that were recommended by ORS. We did not agree to two things. One, the ORS originally had concluded that the existing rate of return of 14% for KIU was appropriate. KIU was asking for 14.5. The stipulated settlement was a compromise and settles at a 14.25% rate of return. We simply concluded that we thought that the rationale and reasoning of the ORS was correct in their original analysis, and that we didn't see that a case had been made for an increase in a rate of return. The second thing that we disagreed with was the proposal that the hydrant fees that were currently being charged by the utility to the St. John's Fire District be rolled instead into the rates that that Kiowa customers pay to KIU. Specifically, we agreed conceptually that over the long term that did make sense, but because two other utility districts, Seabrook and St. John's, were also charging the fire district hydrant fees, that unless all of the water companies were on the same basis, that essentially Kiowa ratepayers were being disadvantaged relative to Kiowa and Seabrook. And in my communication to the Public Service Commission said that at a future time, if the fire district could have all three districts do it the same way, we would be fine with that. But we asked if that change could be deferred into a future date. So we are on record with that. A hearing was held last week in Columbia. Anybody who's interested can go online, and for 2.5 hours you can watch the hearing, which I did. And I think it's estimated that around the middle of 11th to 15th of April, the Public Safety Commission will conclude with a directive. I would guess that the Public Service Commission will in fact agree to what was in the stipulated agreement. I don't honestly expect that our comments will end up being reflected, but I could be wrong. So I think that will conclude our involvement in the rate case, and I think we'll see in a couple weeks where that goes. As a result, of course, we did this without hiring additional outside counsel, so we didn't expend any funds. I appreciate the willingness of the KICA to participate with us if we had hired an attorney, and I think we correctly presumed that hiring additional legal counsel was not going to result in an additional significant enough impact in the outcome to justify the expense. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments, but that's where we're at on that. That is the only comment that I have. So with that, citizens' comments. If anybody has any comments related to an item that is on today's agenda, please approach the podium.
Wendy Kulik, 38 Marsh Edge Lane. Thank you for sharing that information, Greg. I assume the letter that you sent is on the PSC's website?
Yes, it is.
Okay. My first comment has to do with the proclamation that you're going to consider about beach safety. And part of my question is probably a question for Dwayne in terms of whether my suggestion would legally strengthen your position. But given the problems we've heard about from various property owners over the years, there was just recently an exchange on, I think, around Kiowa about a property owner having an incident with somebody else's dog. I was going to suggest that you include in there something about the need to adhere to the town's leash laws about dogs. And again, I don't know if that would strengthen the town's position legally. It seems to me it would be appropriate to be there, and I'm not an attorney and I don't play one on TV, but it seems to me it would strengthen the town's position legally if something should come up. So that would just be a suggestion there. I also know that you're going to be voting on the recommendations for charitable contributions later on. And I just want to say, you know, first of all, I think everybody recognizes that making these contributions is to worthy 501c3s on Johns and Wadmalaw Islands is not something that the town is required to do. And I think most people tremendously appreciate the support that's given. And I just want to say, please, please, please approve everything that impacts kids' education and food insecurity. We know kids can't learn if they're hungry. And I see it every day when I go to Mount Zion or I go to Hot Gap. People shouldn't live this way, and anything we can do to help it is greatly appreciated. So thank you for that.
Thank you for those comments. By the way, before, one thing I should have pointed out too, if I can, there is going to be one change in the agenda, which would be section 8B, to consider approval of Beachwalker Drive improvement, because in the Ways and Means Committee immediately before this meeting, that proposal was not approved, so that will not be on the agenda.
And if you want to bring it up right now, you actually have to get a motion to amend the agenda and get a second and vote for
I'm not
it.
really amending the agenda, I'm just telling them we ain't gonna discuss it.
We're amending the agenda
All
to
right.
take it off.
We have to do that in order to take it off?
Yes, you have to officially amend it
Okay, we'll
because
do
we
that after.
posted
We'll
it.
do that after.
But you can do that once you get to
Well,
that
sorry,
actual.
sorry, Judge, we'll do that afterwards then. I
Dennis
didn't-
McGill, 100 Pleasant Valley Drive. Just a minor point on the minutes of the March meeting. I had brought up the question of a FOIA request that I had made for the deserving employee or employees who had gotten the $500 that was mentioned as a gift card. And the mayor was kind enough to tell me in the interim that it went to Rusty LaMayo. And I had no problem with that answer, and I hoped that it was clarifying that those information in the future, anybody getting it, should be mentioned. And if they're under $50,000, their name doesn't have to be, but you can just mention 200 or 300 went to those 3 or 4 employees who are making less. If I'm correct, I assume I don't have to have a FOIA request to get that information. If I'm wrong, the mayor can tell me, or someone else can tell me.
Okay.
Because the comment was the mayor would speak to the town attorney to discuss my request.
Which
So
way?
I assume he approved it. Yes?
I proved it. I don't know that I talked to the town attorney before I did.
No, I'm saying I assume the town attorney.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just make one correction to Judge McGill's comment. He had made a comment that the 500 gift card had went to Rusty LaMayo, and that's not completely accurate. It was split between 5 employees.
Okay.
Rusty was only one
Was
of
one
5.
Was one of the 5. Is that why you had your checkbook out looking? Then I misspoke. Okay. We will clarify with that. We can clarify it. Okay. Any other citizens' comments? No. All right. Stephanie, then as a point of order, do I need to get approval to amend the adjustment? To amend
Yes,
the
Mr. Mayor,
agenda? All right.
yes.
All right, then, do I need to make a motion to do this?
You can make a motion,
All right, then I would make a motion to eliminate from today's agenda, under consent, item B, to consider approval of Beachwalker Drive improvement, that would be removed from discussion today. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that will come off. And again, the reason is, this item was discussed at Ways and Means, and ultimately Ways and Means left this as an open issue, so we do not have a recommendation to approve. Okay. All right, no other citizens' comments, let's move to presentation. Jim Jordan, we have a presentation on Kiowa Island Municipal Center Native Plant Demonstration Area Project. And I've asked Jim to give this presentation. I just want to make clear both to the council and to the people sitting in the audience today that this is not a recommendation at this point. So we're not looking, we certainly are open and looking for discussion or comment, which can happen here, or if this causes you to have some conversation with Jim later on, that would be great. This is a recommendation, a proposal that they and the environmental committee are looking at, and so we're not looking for a vote, we're not looking for an up and down decision, it's purely at this point informational. Okay. Jim, it's
Okay,
yours.
yeah, thank y'all for having me today. So as the mayor mentioned, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the idea that we have to create a nature trail and demonstration garden here at the Municipal Center. And kind of walk you through the background of how we got to this point and the program that we currently have going. So just to kind of jump back to, okay, why are we even, talking about this? Look at kind of the need for this. And so the first would be, and some of this is fairly intuitive, is that the loss of natural habitat on the island, right, through clearing of yards to build homes, roads, etc., is having a negative impact on the island's wildlife. And we're starting to see that in some of the surveys we conduct. Our bobcat numbers seem to be down, which is resulting in our deer numbers going up. So that's kind of a red flag to us that we're potentially getting close to a tipping point. And so, then the question is, okay, well, what do you do about it? As we all know, there's not a lot of large tracts of land out there that you could preserve, protect. Just isn't feasible. And so this program kind of came out of the need to, okay, well, what can we do? And what we can do is we can impact what people put in their yards along road right-of-ways, leisure trails, common areas, etc. And we feel that doing that is pretty critical to keeping the island's ecosystem intact. So that's kind of the background. And then, so what the environmental committee did about a year ago is we formed a landscape working group. It had representatives from all the island entities. Typically, it was their head of landscaping, or whatever position that was with each entity. So that included the ARB, the partners, community association, the resort. Pretty much it. Well, the club was represented under the partners. And so the idea was, okay, well, what can we do? What can we do? And so what came out of that is we came up with a program we're calling Grow Native. And that was officially unveiled in October of 2018 as part of the town's first Native Plant Week. And so just a quick overview of what that program is and what our objectives are. So, the overall mission of the program is for it to be a community-wide effort to increase the use of native plants and landscaping projects across the island with an overall goal of improving wildlife habitat. So four main objectives. The first was to review and recommend changes to landscaping guidelines, and that is in process. We've already gotten one change so far, and that was a change by the ARB. Prior to this, the ARB required any remodeled landscapes or new landscaping plans to contain 2/3 native trees, but it did not speak to the native component of shrubs and understory and ground cover. So now all future landscaping plans must have 2/3 natives across the board. So that's a good change. So our second objective was to create an online searchable database of native plants. It would provide 23 different plant characteristics, some of those including wildlife values, salt tolerance, deer resistance, and more. And we've actually finished that, and it went live this morning. So that is now on the town's Grow Native website page. Third objective is to design a public outreach program, including social media, promotional materials, and events to, let the public know about this program and, the resources that we have to offer them. And so ideally, we're trying to reach homeowners, landscapers, landscape architects, and also the other island entities. A fourth thing that came out of this program was to have a place to showcase what we want owners to do, what we want landscapers to do, what a good natural landscape should look like. And so the property here was a suitable place to do that. And so that's kind of the main focus of what I'm going to talk about here for the remainder after I give you a quick thing on why natives are important. And I think we all probably know this, but right, native plants, they're native to the area, right? They evolved here over thousands of years. They're very well suited to our local environment, as opposed to non-natives that don't quite do as well sometimes. So the first point would be that native plants provide, it varies, but somewhere between 10 to 15% or 10 to 15 times more value to our wildlife than non-native plants. And native plants require a lot less fertilizer, pesticides, etc. All of that's good for stormwater pollution and runoff, minimizing that. And then, as I said, native plants are very well adapted, and so they give us better protection to the events that happen here, and that's storms, tides, flooding, etc. They're better suited to that. Okay, so now getting into actually the idea for this trail. And I've kind of laid it out in 2 phases. It could actually probably be broken down into 3 phases. And so phase 1 would basically be the installation of the trail itself. And so just to orient you real quick, I guess I'm going to have to point at this one. So we're right here in council chambers. This is the view window, the grassy area right here behind the building. And the little grassy area over here would be where we would envision the start of this trail. So that would be right here. And so that would be where our entrance sign is. And then the trail would effectively be a loop trail through the wooded area. A lot of the trail would go along the marsh edge. And then potentially in a future phase, we may actually kind of connect this trail into the walkway along Municipal Center itself, leading to a trail around the pond edge, so that we could have folks have the ability to see what a good native pond edge should look like. So that's kind of the overall conceptual plan. This trail is about 1/4 mile long. And then, so for this first phase, so this is something that I did budget for, or I included money for in this year's budget. So there is money available in this line item, which comes out of county A-tax. And so this is a quick breakdown of what it would cost to get the path in. And so number one, just putting in the path itself, it'd probably be closer to $1,000, but no more than $1,600. As you saw in the plan, we envisioned 2 benches along the marsh, $1,500 for that, and then a sign, just, welcome sign at the entrance, and then probably some initial plant ID markers along the trail. And then a few plantings around the entrance sign and a little bit of temporary drip irrigation to get that going. So overall, for this year, what we would estimate we would need to get this going is about $6,000. But again, this could be scaled back, and effectively you've got a standalone project if you simply put in the trail itself. If you put in the trail in 2 benches, you've created a nice nature trail. And obviously everything you do after that is just kind of intensifying the effect that it's having. So that's phase 1. And then so phase 2 would basically involve a lot more plantings. And this is whereas phase 1 is basically taking folks on a journey through the different habitat types of Kiowa. So they would go through sunny areas, shady areas, forest edge, marsh edge, and then see the plants that naturally grow in those areas and how they should be pruned and what they look like in a normal condition. Phase 2 would be more showcasing specific native plants, especially ones that have a very high wildlife value, and particularly ones that we don't see planted here very often, but they should be here. One example of that would be milkweed, which is a very critical plant with monarch butterfly. We see almost no milkweed on the island, but if you go to Johns Island or Wadmalaw, it's growing there. So it should be here. And so things like that, we'd like to showcase those, what they look like, and how pretty they are, and hopefully folks will then, will then plant them in their own yards. So that would be phase 2. And phase 2 would be planned
Jim,
for
can
next.
you just
Yep.
go back a slide? So
Sure.
on this drawing, what I'm looking at is really sitting, this little section here is just right out the door here, right? As it comes out of that little piece of the woods right there.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So the start of the trail, would come through the woods, and then as it winds along, this wood line right here going towards the
Right.
marsh is what you're seeing there.
Got
So
it.
you're just seeing the very start of the trail. We're not envisioning any landscaping in the wooded area itself as you go along the marsh. So again, just highlighting what's already there in those areas. So phase 2 is a little tougher to price. And again, this is would be envisioned for next fiscal year. We would envision additional plantings at the start of the trail. It could be as much as 4,000. We could spend less. Some additional interpretive signage. So what we would envision here would be a sign at each habitat type that basically says, okay, this is a marsh edge. These are the plants you would find here. Just some interesting information about that. Plants and wildlife that make their home there. Some additional plant ID markers. And then maintenance is a little bit tricky. We're not talking about adding a whole lot of maintenance. The amount of planted bed space that we're adding would be a drop in the bucket to compare to what's already out there. The trail itself would need a little bit of maintenance. So that would be keeping vegetation off, removing down limbs, that sort of thing. That's stuff that we would try to do ourselves, Aaron and I, and potentially volunteer labor as well. So that could be garden club, other volunteers. And so we're estimating around $1,500 for that. So you're around $7,500 for year 2, which, assuming you did all of this, you'd be around $13,500 for everything. And then if we extended it in a future phase, to have the trail go around the pond edge, not a whole lot of additional costs there. It's already open. The plantings are already in along the pond. It would simply be signage to, let folks know what they're seeing over there. So that's it. Happy to answer questions, go back over anything, or whatever you guys would like.
There's a little garden in the park. That was intended to also include some native plants and so on.
Yeah.
Do we know whether that's been helpful to people, or do we know anything much about the results?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has. So that's a conservancy project, and it is primarily native, but there are a lot of non-natives in there. The big differences between what we're talking about doing and what they're doing, theirs is very, very formal, very heavily pruned, which a lot of property owners, may want that, right? And so if they're looking for the formal look, then that's a good place for them to go. But what we're trying to encourage is the maintained but natural look. So minimal pruning, all natives. We wouldn't put anything in this garden that is not 100% native. And again, just really trying to focus on, right? So ideally, if you're a property owner and you live on a marsh edge, you can come here and say, okay, I see that marsh edge. I see what's growing there. Okay, this is what should be there. And maybe I can do things a little bit differently. And so that's the big difference.
I like the concept of taking space we already own and sort of operate and getting more uses out of it than just looking at it, which is what most of us do.
Yeah,
today. So
it's amazing having only walked through that wooded portion of the property over there. there's some incredible views to the marsh there that you would never know were there, because you got to walk through some pretty thick stuff to get there.
I think this is a great idea, and I really hope that this can be done sooner rather than later. The area in the park that Dan was referring to also has a guided tour that you can listen to, and I've seen a lot of people use that when I go walking. And I would see the same thing here. People come to town hall or they need something, or visitors stop, go to the visitor center. It's something else that they could do and learn from.
Jim, if I understand, and you and I walked through the area, or well, looked in the area yesterday.
Yeah, we did.
As far as the two phases, where people then are gonna see plantings will be in phase two. The phase one is essentially opening up areas so they can see things that are naturally growing today along the marsh. So there's really, in that part of it, there's really no new plants that are being added.
I just had a very only a few plants around the entrance sign to make it attractive and showcase a couple of species. But no, phase two would be where the bulk of the planting that we're
Of the
going
new
to do
planting
would
occurs.
happen. Correct.
And I do think the little signs for the plants is important,
Yeah.
so people know what they're looking at.
Sure.
Yeah, this might not surprise many, but I'm not overly enthusiastic.
Okay.
In large part because I don't think this is a space that attracts a great number of people to come and view what it is you're trying to demonstrate.
Sure.
I know the Conservancy would be interested in working with the town to do something along these lines, and I don't know if you're interested in talking to them, but given it's ATAX money, I'd probably get persuaded, but on the surface, it doesn't grab me.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I think that you're right that currently this building and these grounds are not heavily utilized by residents or visitors, at all. And I think, if going with the phased approach, and you put in this trail and you market it, and Stephanie and I have talked about potentially having, an event here in the fall. We've talked to the community association about that as well. Doing a joint event where we could feature the trail itself and that it's here, and see what kind of use we get. I mean, if folks want to come here and walk around and see how beautiful it is down by the marsh, then we'll know that, and we can then spend a little more to make it what we initially think we want. But I think that's why the phased approach, right? It's not a big cost up front, and then we can gauge interest and kind of see from there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would ask that what council members, if you would, I know you've given some comments here, but over the next week or whatever, give Jim whatever additional thoughts you have, both pro, con, or questions or whatever. With respect to the overall objectives, the broader objectives that Grow Native, I mean, I absolutely think this is an important objective for the town. I think we've seen over the last couple of years when we've had issues with our storms, the impact that seawater and other things have had on all of the non-native growth. Clearly, I think Jim has made, as had the Conservancy, a good case over the last couple of years that the loss of understory and vegetation on the island are having a significant impact. So the broad objectives here, I think, are critical, and the things that are being done around the new website and so on, all of this, I think, is really important. I think Chris raises an important question. Nobody remembers the movie Field of Dreams, so I keep saying, if they build it, will they come? But I still think that is a legitimate question, which is, this is not a natural stopping off point for people. So one of the questions that I've asked Jim is if we did this, what would we be doing to ensure that we really built a recognition that was here and an interest. What you don't want to have is a situation where you invest something with a great idea, people don't come, so then you don't then you don't maintain it, then it just becomes a downward spiral. So I think it's important to ask the question, if you are going to do this, how do we really make sure that we make it successful? And so I think the overall concept is a great idea. The details are always what's important. So please give Jim some good feedback on this, and then I would ask that he come back as soon as he's ready with either a proposal to move forward and or give us what feedback he got that would cause him to propose something different. Any other comments?
No.
Jim, anything else?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Thank you,
appreciate it very
Jim.
much. Okay. All right, we'll move to the, we have no old business. The consent agenda, which now, since one item has been taken off, is our proposal to consider approval of the proposal from Alden Jenkins as our new town auditors. This was discussed and recommended by Ways and Means for approval. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, and then we will move to new business. My papers. And I do have a proclamation. And Wendy, I did hear your comments. I'm not going to adjust this now, but I appreciate your comments about leashes and dog safety, and it is a continuing issue and something we need to worry about. The focus of this was on the beach, so at the moment, I'm not going to make a change to it, but I appreciate those comments. I do have, we don't make a lot of proclamations, but obviously the beach is a critical part, and the water are a critical part of this community and this island. We have thousands of visitors who come here every year to enjoy our beach. And so I do want to make a proclamation that for National Beach Safety Week, whereas the beautiful coastal and inland beaches of South Carolina represent a world-renowned recreational resource, and whereas Kiawah Island's residents and visitors alike are drawn to these beaches by the millions each year for water and beach activities, and whereas the aquatic environment has dangers that can be effectively managed through public awareness and the vigilance of professional lifeguards, and whereas for reasons of public safety, an annual reminder of the joys and hazards associated with the aquatic environment are appropriate at the commencement of the busy summer beach season, and whereas Kiawah residents and visitors alike must remember to learn to swim, swim near a lifeguard, swim with a buddy, check with lifeguards, use sunscreen, and I have trouble getting through all of these programs. Use sunscreen and drink water, obey posted signs and flags, keep the beach and water clean, learn rip current safety, enter water feet first, and wear a life jacket.
We don't have to wait for an hour after we eat anymore.
We can
We don't want to
We can
dive
write-
in.
we can
All
write
of us
that in.
old people remember that.
Now therefore,
Yeah.
I, Craig Weaver, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the town of Kiawah Island, do hereby proclaim May 20th to May 27th, 2019 as Natural Beach Safety Week in the town of Kiawah Island, and urge all residents and visitors using our beach to enjoy themselves at the beach this year while taking appropriate measures to protect themselves and their children. In witness whereof, I have hereunto sent my hand the 2nd day of April 2019 in the town of Kiawah Island, South Carolina. This will be signed by Craig Weaver, Mayor, Town of Kiawah Island. And in fact, while we take some humor in all of the different programs, this is important. We have our representative of our beach patrol today, and obviously part of this is to support the important work that they do, not only all year long, but especially in the summer, in trying to maintain a safe and active beach for our residents and for our guests. While we may have some humor at all of the different programs, the fact is they are all very important, and they are all things that are important to us. And as this beach gets busier and busier in the summer, I think it is important for us to just remind people that they need to be safe and think about things, especially rip currents and other such issues. So I'm very happy to provide this proclamation. So with that, we will move to item B, to consider approval of the charitable grant funding amounts. You have the proposed list in your materials, and because of the, again, these proposals were all discussed at last week's Ways and Means Committee and recommended for approval to Town Council. Because we have some recusals that need to take place among council members, we're going to break this into 3 different proposals. The first,
Mayor, I believe I would be the first recusal.
we have, actually the recusals, Councilman Waddock and myself are recusing ourselves from discussion of the proposal involving Kiowa Women's Foundation.
No,
You
I'm
are,
recusing myself from Habitat for
Habitat.
Humanity because I'm on the board.
all right, so we're gonna separate these. So first of all, I will make a proposal, if I can get out the Habitat, for on this list, item 25. I will make a motion to approve a contribution of $10,000 to the Sea Island Habitat for Humanity. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, so that moves forward. Then, do we have a motion for approval of Kiowa Women's Foundation?
Yes, I propose we provide the Kiowa Women's Foundation the amount allocated in line 15. And any additional money that's not allocated.
That's
No.
gonna be
No.
made elsewhere,
Sorry.
so,
You
Okay.
have a
mo-
yeah.
so this is a motion only impacting Kiowa Women's Foundation. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that carries.
Mhm.
And now.
I would like to make a motion, first to add to the list that we have in front of us, in the amount of $9,424, for Kiowa Cares Foundation for the use as listed in their application, which is for Mount Zion. In addition to that, to approve the balance of the funds listed on the charitable contributions page as shown in the packet today.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion, questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Town Administrator report.
Yeah, so I have a few things on the list that I just wanted to update everyone on. One, we've had, for about a year, I guess now, we've had an opening in our Development Services Department, which is under Bruce, for a code compliance officer, and we have extended an offer to a gentleman on Friday, so we're waiting for him to sign the offer letter. So hopefully by the next town council meeting, we will have someone on board, or I will be able to officially announce that person. So we're
Has he provided a verbal indication?
He's provided a verbal indication. He, based on his work schedule, he can't talk to his boss until tomorrow.
Understand.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So we're confident that he will accept that position. The other update is that you all know from, I guess, last year, this is in regards to the sea level rise report that came out of the Environmental Committee and the great work that they did. The previous town council had made they wanted to be able to memorialize in some way the great efforts that was made by members of the Sea Level Rise Committee. And what came from that were 3 or 4 objectives that was listed as part of my role and my responsibility, along with my staff, John Taylor. And part of the way to memorialize is that we discuss incorporating into the comprehensive plan, so that we basically don't have a standalone document that just sits on the shelf. And then after a couple of years, you may look at it, but you really don't do anything with it. So we were charged with working with the Planning Commission to look at ways to incorporate some of the language into the comp plan. And right now we are well on our way of doing that. John has did a great job in leading the discussion. The Planning Commission is put together through Fred, who's the chair. He's put together a work group. So we have 3 members of the Planning Commission that is working with Jim Jordan and John Taylor, are staff there, and what we're looking at is different ways to be able to add some of the language of very much broader language. We're not looking at so much specific stuff. As you look at the report, there may be a number of recommendations, but we're looking from a more specific, much more broader standpoint in terms of, you guys help me out there. What are some of, we just have a few things that we are, and I cannot off the top of my head think of some of the things, but it really is centered around, and I'm
Well,
sorry, you're
yeah,
part of that group as well,
we're trying to
Chris.
focus on, as we think through issues, to make certain that we are incorporating the issue of sea level rise, flood
And flood
mitigation
mitigation.
into those topics. The one that comes to mind right now is making sure that we take into account the water lens on the island, so that we're understanding whether or not sea level rise is having any negative effect on that very important asset.
Right. And we're looking at the various elements. So in the comp plan, you may have, I believe, 9 elements or so, and one's natural resource or environment, different things. So we are looking at specific language to put in there, very broad but specific, and then you have needs or goals, and we're actually spelling out those. Ultimately, the long-term goal of this, of course, is that once we get a document that we are happy with, it will then present it to the Planning Commission as a recommendation to incorporate into the comp plan, and ultimately it comes to council. And Dan's also, I believe, you're part of that group as well. And then ultimately come to council for approval to be officially adopted into the comp plan. With, as well as sea level rise,
Do you have a guess on what month that will likely get?
our goal is May.
For town council or for the planning commission?
For Planning Commission was May, correct? Are we still on that timeline?
Yeah,
And then
that's
June?
pretty aggressive.
Yes.
Yeah, it's slow sledding. There's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff to get through.
We may say June or July, but say July to town council. Okay. But we are getting through it, but it's been great. We've had, I think, 2 meetings so far, and we've had some really good discussion on that. And so, we'll have something, I guess, then by July to town council. With regards to the sea level rise flood report, as part of the discussion that we had at Ways and Means in terms of, discussion that we will have with our Public Works Committee, we had 2 RFP proposals that were out for the Parkway, and those came in on Friday, and we'll take a look at that. But part of the discussion with sea level rise as well is looking at the project on the Parkway, and if near Mingle Point or other areas along the Parkway, if we need to raise that, and where do we, and how much. The city of Charleston's just adjusted their table to 2 to 3 feet. Ours initially we discussed, it's between 1.5 to 2 feet. So those are some of the discussions that we'll have with regards to whoever is selected to work with us on the Parkway project. Going into that road project, the other thing which I've already updated, so I won't talk very long about that, but just for those that were not at the Ways and Means meeting, is that we have a project along Beachwalker Drive, which is called Beachwalker Drive road improvement, which is to add a left turn lane into the county park. As you know, the county's doing a lot of upgrades to their portion of the park, and there are projected timelines to have that completed by the first week or mid-May. What we were hoping and what we're looking at doing is being able to mirror that project and have ours completed by Memorial Weekend, to be able to add in a right turn lane that would tie into the park to help reduce some of the stacking on Beachwalker, especially during the peak time, so people can just basically merge and get into the turn lane. The park has done some other great things with regards to trying to help mitigate the problems that we're having there on Beachwalker, which is they've introduced a, what do you call that?
A queue system.
A queue system, thank you, which is very similar to, as we said earlier, like a Chili's, but with the exception is that you pull up, if the parking lot is full, they basically take your telephone number, and then you go into a queue. You can go and enjoy Freshfields, and when that space becomes available, you receive a text message saying that your space is now available. You have so much time to come back and get back in line. But by having this additional lane, the hope is that you will be able to use the lane and be able to bypass anyone that's trying to get their telephone number in the queue or what have you. So we're all working together to try to make some improvements to Beachwalker Drive. And I've already mentioned the Parkway. And again, that RFP, we just got 2 bid proposals back to really look at doing, this will be for design work. This is not the construction aspect of it yet, but just design work to look at repaving and anything else that we might have to do on the parkway. Do you guys have any questions on any of those 3 so far I've gone over quickly? Okay. The other that I just want to bring to your attention is that we do have a work group, a plastics work group that has been led by Jim Jordan. And one of the things, this is what council have asked us to do, is to go and really just take a look. This came out of the town council, as you recall, planning retreat that we had in January. And we didn't talk in great detail, but what staff was charged with was going and looking at putting together a work group and looking at what surrounding communities have done with regards to the ban on various plastics. As we all know, and if we don't, the county, which is the unincorporated areas, they had 3rd reading, and they have a very kind of baseline proposal that they've adopted that will impact in 6 months. It was a 6-month timeline, so they adopted it in March, but made it effective 6 months after the adoption. So for the most part, it'll be this fall. So actually, if you live in Cassique, you'll fall under the county ban because they're in the unincorporated areas here on Kiowa. But what this committee is doing is that they're charged with looking at what other municipalities are doing in coming with a idea or proposal to town council in a work group format. Now, since we have the county have a ban they put in place, a very basic but baseline ban, we believe that this work group can really kind of take that as a foundation to start and say, well, how is Kiowa unique? Do we need to add anything in addition to what the county is proposed? And again, this is just a discussion topic that will go to council hopefully sometime this month in a work group session. So they're not really going to present an ordinance. It will just be kind of like, this is what the county's done, and maybe there's some bullet points in terms of what Kiowa can look at in terms of making some adjustments if that's something that the town is interested in doing. Mayor, would you like to add anything to that?
No.
Okay. And last, just like to give you an update in case you start seeing some activity tomorrow morning. 77 Eugenia Drive, they have received a beach renourishment permit through the general permit that was issued from the last storm. Is that correct, Jim? In August. Yeah. Yeah, because of the storm. So they did receive a permit through OCRM. So what is the town's kind of responsibility and what do we do? We're in the review process, but if the permit is approved by OCRM, and in this case, they had to also get approval through KICA because they're going to be using the Eugenia vehicular or emergency access to be able to go and put the sand there. They've received permission from both entities. In KICA's approval, they basically have just noted, same as ours, what we asked is that the work be done prior to Easter. So they have mobilized today, and they'll start work tomorrow. And the project should take about how many weeks? Well, since they have to be done by 12th, only about I was going to say, it should only take about 3 days, hopefully. If not, they have to be done by the 12th. They have provided to John as a requirement of the town a safety and a work plan, and we can add some conditions, and we've added some conditions, and we're looking at that, but it is something that's approved. So if you see any work on the beach, they did receive the appropriate permits to move forward, and they should be done by this Friday. There anything you'd like to add on that?
I just want to make a couple comments. I probably shouldn't on this one. I mean, obviously, in no way does the town ever want to get in the way or restrict the proper ability of an individual property owner to protect their home and their property. So I don't want it to be considered that we're doing that. On the other hand, historically, we've treated Kiowa as a single. The beach is a critical resource, a single entity. The town has I think always been the driver behind any of our major beach renourishment projects, whether it be the the major project we had a couple of years ago in response to the storms, or the periodic large projects that we've had at the east end of the beach around the ocean course. I think it's always been critical that we are in these projects thinking about the long-term health of the beach and the proper way to manage that environment. And to my knowledge, this is, I think, is the first time that an individual property owner has ever moved forward to conduct their own beach renourishment project on the beach. And this is not a small project. I think, Jim, we're talking how many truckloads of dirt?
It's 800 cubic yards, so it depends on how big the trucks are.
So significant project, and unlike one that was that another property owner pursued a couple years ago that had 100 or more people objecting to it, this one didn't get a comment. But it will take place. I think we have concerns about long-term opening up the door to any property owner deciding that they want to go out and reconfigure the beach. So, but having said that, this property owner has apparently all of the legal responsibility and right to do it, and the community association has provided them with access to the beach. So it will take place, and we'll see what happens. But if residents see the trucks moving on the beach, it's not our project. It is a private project.
That's it.
All right. Council member updates, either any personal comments or committee updates or any of the committees you might be involved in. Chris, I'll start on your end.
None.
That was quick.
It was.
Dan.
I just want to comment on the Arts Council. As many of you know, the Arts Council gets very busy this time of year, supported by our two professional staff, Stephanie Braswell and Keely Lawton, developing a program for a year from now, or next fiscal year, starting in July. The programs this year have been terrific, well attended. I'm going to give the council a more formal report next month on how we're doing and what attendance looks like, but it's been excellent. We've had some just great concerts. So they're working and developing a schedule. We are challenged by one thing which we knew was going to happen, which is the long-term loss of the East Beach Conference Center because of development of that area. It'll get used for the PGA for an extended period of time while they're here for the golf tournament, and then after that we may not have the use of it anymore, but we're looking at alternatives, and they've been very helpful. So we're going forward. They're working hard. It's a lot of hours that goes into it, but it looks like we'll have a great program again this next year for our residents and guests.
It is great. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to say that I'm really happy the school computer lab will be receiving money from charitable giving. At this point, I would like to say, too, thank you to the staff who did such a wonderful job of going out and talking to all the organizations and really coming back with very thought-out, thoughtful recommendations to us. It made our job so much easier, so thank you. I will be working with the fire chief to get those other towns, those communities included so that we can move the fire hydrant costs. And we're also working on public safety, in addition, regarding drones to complement KICA and what they have in place.
Because KICA has put a regulation in place impacting just KICA general property.
That's right. It doesn't
Yeah.
impact the beach, which is our major
Right.
concern.
Which is going to be an area of confusion if we don't.
Right.
Yeah, okay. All right. Any other council comments? Citizens' comments?
Wendy Kulik, 38 Marsh Lane. Just a quick question. In terms of follow-up to the question I raised about signage and how yucky the sign looks, has anything
The ones out
progressed
here?
with that? Yeah.
Yeah.
We just redid.
Any updates?
Those are the updated new signs.
We have the new ones out here?
Yes.
Well, then I'll have to look, because
I will too.
truthfully,
Yeah,
I
'cause
didn't
they
look on my
weren't-
way in,
They weren't there a
because
couple
Yeah,
days
the-
ago, so
We have the new one that's out there, it's up higher, and then we have
the new one that's out here, so they are up.
Fingers crossed they withstand the weather better.
Oh.
Thank you.
I haven't noticed them yet either, so I saw the old ones. Okay,
That makes me feel good.
yeah.
Holly Newman, Kiwa Cares. I just wanted to say thank you to Ways and Means and to the council for considering and approving some funding for our project, and we look forward to reporting our success in the near future.
Thank you.
Dennis McGill, 100 Pleasant Valley Drive. I noticed again an executive session with the attorney, and I know the last time it came up, I said, I don't know exactly, just asking for advice had to be done in an executive session. If you were settling the case or if you were considering an offer that was made by the auditors, that would be something that should be in executive session. But let me mention a couple other things because I was somewhat surprised because I don't remember this council ever formally recommending a dismissal of the civil case against Tamika Rucker. And when I went online and I found out, although I had been asking for a lot of information regarding the service that is of the civil complaints against Rucker and Gunnels, I never got a response as to whether they were served or if they were, what it cost. And lo and behold, I go online and the circuit court indicates that there was a stipulation of dismissal as to both of them with prejudice without ever being served the civil complaints at all on February 25th this year. That threw me a little bit. And nevertheless, $150 to sign for each complaint, $300. Well, I guess that was money that you felt was appropriate to spend. But I've always asked and said that I think our town attorney ought to give us an update on all pending cases at every meeting. I have the ability to go online and get some information from the circuit court, but they don't have everything, and I think Wayne will admit that. But going on to the Webster case, Webster Rogers, basically the original complaint, which was very well done and cast, had three counts, two of which are still viable, one of which was dismissed by a motion of the defendants. And most recently, I found that there wasn't any response to the discovery interrogatories by Dwayne, by Webster Rogers. And because of that, the mediation was adjourned from actually March to basically the middle of July. And if it's going to be a trial, it wouldn't be held until sometime after September. So I was wondering, Wayne, maybe have the interrogatories been answered?
Well, this is citizens' comments. We'll go ahead and finish all your comments, and then we'll determine at that point.
Okay, and what I was interested in also have they served interrogatories on the town? And even beyond that, are there depositions scheduled?
Very briefly, thank you, Mr. McGill, or Judge McGill. The defendants in this case originally filed a motion to dismiss, trying to dismiss the whole case.
I know that, and only one count was dismissed.
Judge, let's let our attorney answer the question.
Okay.
But the case is still pending. During the pending discovery, pending motion, they did not answer our outstanding discovery request. So as you know, the only way to get discovery after that is to do a motion to compel. We did file a motion to compel, and that just was responded to. So we do have discovery from them. They have not served us with any.
Okay.
And so after discovery, as you know, is when we go into the depositions, which is part of what, I need to advise council on, is what the depositions would entail
Yeah.
and everything.
Well, maybe
else.
this is of interest only to me, but I think maybe the general public would like to have some sort of an update like he just gave. And it doesn't have to be an executive session if in fact there's no settlement proposal or consideration. Anyhow, thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizens' comments? All right, although we do try to have very few executive sessions, we do have on the agenda in executive session 2 items. Executive session pursuant to section 34-70 to receive legal advice regarding the Webster Rogers case, and a second item, executive session to discuss the personnel matter. Do I have a motion to convene into executive session?
Motion to convene.
Do I have a
Second.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and I will, the question that I will always get is, do I have a thought of how long this might be? And I think this will be relatively short.
Well, that means 3 or 4 hours.
No, it will be shorter than that. It will be shorter than that.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate it.
We have townhouses, beach management plan.
Are we going into the conference room or are we staying here?
I have nothing there that's not do this. I didn't quite get the language.
No, I don't recognize that name.
He was a doctor, but he was the mayor of Jersey City for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know a lot of the mayors from
Yeah,
Jersey
well, he
City.
was the one that, after
they're paying for it.
Whalen was
Right.
indicted, he took his place. And
Okay.
he was the one that made me
800 cubic
corporation
yards of sand.
counsel.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Well, he was a
He
smart
was
man.
He was a Democrat.
He was a smart guy.
Then the next highest,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I should say, mayor of Jersey City was Brett Schummer.
Fred Schundler. I know him well.
I can get you some feedback if you let me know. You know, on fire hydrants or whatever it is. Just so you're aware of that.
Anyways, looks good, Hal. Thanks.
You gonna hang around then? Yes. Good luck.
I'm looking for the candy. What are you looking for? Dark chocolate. Only this one? Only because it's good for my heart. And if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn.
Is it good for your waistline?
Well,
Actually, I apologize for that.
no.
Because you got, your waistline is okay.
Well, only because I work at it.
But you're always at the gym, right?
I'm not always.
But often.
Is this another dark one? Yes. Thank you.
We can take up a collection and buy you some darkies. Take care. Be good.
Have a good one.
Yes, ma'am. I think I know the reason. When Jim had his presentation up there, the green there was so much lighter than there. Is that because that has a white background and those have black backgrounds? Plus, it's not the LED screen. Sorry? It's not an LED screen like that, it's always gonna, and plus we got this, I think this. Oh,
so happened, it so happened that the Sweet 16 was happening while we were there, and my wife was like, "Oh, what a neat experience! How beautifully kids!" And blah, blah. Those tickets were $400 each.
Oh my gosh.
So $2,000 worth of basketball tickets and that cheap trip got expensive. So, you know, but that was still nice, I guess.
That's nice.
It was alright.
It's nice to do that while you have them tapped into in the house, because then when they start,
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a trip without my kids.
great.
Yeah.
Why don't you play next year? Oh, or later this year? Oh,
Thank my oldest, will be 13 in a month. And it's a girl, and then 2 boys, 9 and 8. Well, I mean, I'm wiping out all my vacation time on a trip with them this summer, so.
where are you going this summer?
I mean, it'll be cool, but our children's choir is singing a festival in Canterbury, England,
Oh my gosh, I've been there.
and then they have been invited to sing at a mass at Notre Dame in Paris.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I really wasn't prepared to fund that trip, but it's one of those kind of like once in a lifetime sort of things.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, all 5 of us, those flights were more expensive.
I was just gonna say, I don't think JetBlue will get you there.
I did find that if you can get to Boston or New York, Norwegian Air has pretty cheap flights to Europe.
Is it at the beginning of the summer? No. We're gonna need it for out looking for my truck every day in the student park. I used to take my kids to school because I worked on, Folly Road. So, and I had a stepson that could find the fight if it was 5 miles away. So I would just sit in the parking lot, let them sit in the truck, you know, their friends would come sit in the truck. And then it got to the point where they were more like, I need you to go to the office. And I said, excuse me, I said, I'm done my high school. Ryan was real involved in sports though. He played varsity basketball and football, so he really enjoyed it.
Well, we're not sure it's even an option for us because my understanding is it's become such a popular place to transfer in from failing schools that there may not be room. And, you know, my daughter is
you don't have neighbors.
I understand both perspectives.
Just trying to figure out if I can just build it at night. I know I shouldn't feel that way, but
Rent something. You know, just rent something and try it.
yeah, it's true. It's a great idea to just do it that way. Try it on for size.
You can't find anything to rent on John Island anymore that's not under $2,000 a month. We're about 1,300 square feet.
She's paying money, right?
I wish you would tell me. I do.
So wrong, Stephanie. There.
I don't know. It's, I kind of vacillate back and forth. When we were building our house, we lived in a tiny little apartment, a block off of Meeting Street, and I love walking everywhere. I love it. But then when I get out to Brockville, I did relax a lot. So.
Got something. Shouldn't be too much longer. Really quick, it shouldn't be too much longer. I'll be right back.
She can. Oh,
You can get an Uber coming out, whether you get one going back in or not.
Okay, well, then how did I get to the Christmas party with John?
there was
and back
probably
home?
one Uber on that.
No,
So I have a
there
funny,
wasn't. There was four of
I
them.
have a funny story
There was
about
four
Uber.
of them at that time.
Uber was arguing with us about the gate when they first started bringing people from, mainly from the airport.
Sure.
And, they made this big pitch about there's this huge demand for Uber out here. And I said, that's baloney. I said, I can understand people taking an Uber from the airport out in Kiowa, but it's just no one's gonna expect that they're gonna punch that. I mean, maybe somebody at the sanctuary is gonna try and then realize that it just, you know, it just not, it'll never work. And they go, oh yeah, it will. So I signed up to be an Uber driver.
Kidding.
I did for about a month straight. I would turn it on at the office, and I'd sit around for about 10 minutes, and then I'd start heading to town. I'd leave it on, and I kept a log of where I got my first ride request. And every once in a while, I would get one while I was still on a job site, but almost every time it was like as I was going across the bridge onto James Island. Never one out here, ever.
I guess you proved them wrong, huh?
I did. I mean, we still ended up working out an arrangement with them, but
Because I asked Dorota at one time, because it was like somewhere where you get a percentage of the money that they make. And, I mean, we do get a check from them for a percentage. I mean, it's not a huge check, but
so what we did with them is we set them up like a limo service, where they pay a fleet rate, which I think is like $2,000 a year or whatever. But in addition, every Uber that comes through the gate, there's like a geofence set up, and it just automatically
guy who's buying a house lives, he's renting a house 3 doors from me. And, so he said I could probably just stay there because he's not moving in until probably July. But if not, Butch Deal told me I could bunk out in his house for a while. I close on the other one May 1st, so then Cal can go out there, just stay up there. Just take a suitcase full of clothes.
You know, I lived in a hotel room, a Hampton Inn hotel room in Hilton Head for about 3 months one time. I was by myself. We had, this was way back when I was in the banking business. We had financed 2 new developments down there, Belfair and Berkeley Hall. And as part of the development line of credit, we also set up like a special financing program for people buying lots. And had so much demand that people down in our office down there couldn't accept it. So I went and literally from Monday to Friday for 3 months sat in an office underwriting lot lines. I mean, if I had been working on commission, I'd made a fortune. But it was so bad because I would spend all day in that office and then go to a hotel room and I didn't know anyone down there. And so I had to get creative with stuff just to do to get out of it. Actually, I jogged a lot during that 3 months.
And bankers, Bank of America, since I started back. And so I said, all my accounts were Bank of America. I said, okay, I needed a mortgage for the house on Myrtle Beach, New Country. So I said, look, I want to pay about $100,000. I said, I'm going to get $40,000 mortgage. I said, should be simple.
Sure, yeah.
So I go get their mortgage specialist. Call me, he starts going through, like 2 weeks ago. And they'll have, oh, you're fine. I said, well, I need a letter. Approval to send to this guy. And finally, he's driving through, and he starts asking for all this stuff. And I said, well, wait a minute. You're asking me for bank records. You are the bank. You have all my records. I bank there, everything. You know, my retirement stuff is there. So finally, I told the guy I called him up yesterday, I said, look, I really appreciate you bringing it up, but I'm just on vacation. I said, this is ridiculous. That's what our real estate guy said. It's called HELOC. He says, as soon as you sign the thing, just go over and
Probably the guy sitting in the office that you talked to, probably.
oh, well, as I told you,
That is true.
the last section of the flood management. Yeah, there's about building the berm.
All right,
Bruce is gonna go over tomorrow, take a look at it
okay.
and see what's there.
All right, and for the record, in executive session on both items, in executive session on both items, in executive, I want to turn this off. Am I back on?
You're on.
All right, on both items in executive session, we took no votes and we made no decisions. Do I have a motion to, move out of executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, now do I have a motion to reconvene in our regular session?
I move to reconvene.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. And having said that, in executive session, we made no decisions, we took no votes. And there being no further items on the agenda, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.
Wendy, I'm always amazed at your fortitude to stay.
I'm still trying to figure out why he's still there.
I know, that's what I was like, oh, you stayed for this?
Comments at the end of this.
One of these
No.
nights, you're gonna